Every source calls Lake Baikal the deepest lake on Earth. Most of them give you the depth, run through a few comparisons, and move on. Beneath the water sits a hidden layer almost nobody accounts for, one that pushes the true scale of this ancient scar startlingly close to the Mariana Trench. Once you understand what is actually down there, the legends surrounding this lake start to look a little less like folklore. In southeastern Siberia, roughly 1,500 kilometers north of Mongolia, sits a lake that does not look like much on a map. Modest, elongated, tucked into a corner of the globe most people could not point to. Baikal ranks only 7th in the world by surface area. Smaller than Lake Michigan, smaller than Lake Superior, a fraction of the size of the Caspian Sea. On paper, it should not be remarkable at all. Surface area, though, tells you almost nothing about this lake. Baikal holds 23,610 cubic kilometers of water. That is nearly twice what Lake Superior holds, and around 5 times the volume of Lake Michigan, despite both of those lakes covering more surface area. Put the 5 Great Lakes of North America together. Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario combined, and Baikal still holds more water than all of them. By itself, that single lake accounts for close to 20% of all the unfrozen fresh water on the surface of the entire planet. One lake holding a fifth of the world's supply. More than 330 rivers and streams feed into Baikal from the surrounding mountains, tracing a shoreline that stretches roughly 2,100 kilometers around the lake's edge. And yet all of that water leaves through a single outlet, the Angara River, the only river flowing out of Baikal at all. Water pours in from over 300 directions and drains out through exactly one. Part of what makes that possible is how clean the water actually is. In its clearest stretches, sunlight penetrates Baikal's surface, far enough that visibility can reach around 40 meters down, among the clearest natural fresh water anywhere on Earth. Almost nothing is suspended in the water to block the light or fill the volume with anything other than water itself. A lake with a modest footprint, holding more fresh water than an entire continent's most famous lake system. That is a structural anomaly, and it demands an explanation. Which raises an unsettling question. How does a lake this size hold that much water? The answer is depth. Extreme, almost unreasonable depth. Baikal's average depth is 744 meters, or about 2,440 feet. That number alone is difficult to picture, so consider this. The Burj Khalifa, the tallest building on the planet, stands 828 meters tall. Baikal's average depth is nearly as tall as that entire skyscraper, and that is just the average, not the deepest point. At its lowest point, Baikal drops to 1,642 meters, over 5,300 feet. Stack 5.5 Eiffel Towers on top of one another, and the entire structure would still be underwater. For most of the 20th century, that number was theoretical. Reaching the true bottom of Baikal was not something surface equipment could confirm on its own, and for decades, the deepest point of the lake remained more of an estimate than a measurement anyone had directly verified. That changed in 2008 and 2009, when a Russian expedition sent 2 crude MIR submersibles, the same vessels used to survey the wreck of the Titanic, down to the lake floor. Over a series of dives, the crews became among the first people to visually confirm the deepest point of Baikal in person. What they found down there was alive with activity. The submersibles documented active gas seeps and hydrothermal vent activity directly on the lake bed, along with deposits of methane hydrate, a frozen crystalline form of natural gas that stays stable only under specific conditions of pressure and cold. Baikal was among the first freshwater lakes on the planet confirmed to hold gas hydrate deposits of this kind, a feature otherwise associated almost exclusively with deep ocean floors. In other words, the bottom of the deepest lake on Earth is geologically active, venting heat and gas from far beneath the crust. In formations scientists still return to study. This is where most videos about Baikal stop. Deepest lake in the world, staggering numbers. Moving on to the next fact. The 1,642-meter figure everyone cites marks where the water ends. The rift itself continues far below that, and understanding why requires going back to how this lake came to exist in the first place. Skip that part, and the vents and hydrates the MIR dives found make far less sense. To understand what is actually beneath Baikal, it helps to understand how lakes are normally formed. Most lakes on Earth are young, geologically speaking, even the ones that look ancient to the eye. When the last ice age ended around 100,000 years ago, retreating glaciers carved basins into the land and filled them with meltwater as the ice pulled back. Nearly every lake familiar to people today was born this way. Baikal formed differently. Baikal sits where two of the Earth's tectonic plates are slowly pulling apart, the Amur plate tearing away from the Eurasian plate, in a process similar to the one currently splitting East Africa's Great Rift Valley in two. Researchers who track the movement estimate the rift widens by roughly 2 centimeters a year, an almost imperceptible shift on a human timescale, and yet enough to have carved out one of the deepest structures on the continent. As the plates separate, the crust between them stretches, thins, and eventually collapses downward, forming a rift valley. Erosion and shifting bedrock deepen that rift further still, while the same tectonic forces that pull the crust apart continue to feed heat upward from below, which is very likely what powers the vents the MIR dives recorded. Baikal is an open wound in the Earth's crust, slowly widening for 25 to 30 million years, the product of tectonic plates pulling apart rather than ice melting away. By some estimates, that makes it the oldest lake on the planet. For comparison, Lake Tanganyika in East Africa, itself formed by a similar rifting process, is thought to be somewhere between 9 and 12 million years old, meaning Baikal had already existed for millions of years before Tanganyika's rift even began to open. Old enough to have existed before the Himalayas fully rose, old enough that the animals drinking from its shores in its early history were nothing like anything alive today. Giant flightless predatory birds, early oversized relatives of the rhinoceros, species that vanished long before humans existed to name them. A scar in the earth, deepening for 30 million years, 2 centimeters at a time. Most rift lakes elsewhere in the world are geologically young enough that they have not had time to accumulate anything close to what sits beneath Baikal. Time is the one ingredient nothing can substitute for, and Baikal has had more of it than almost any lake on the planet. And the deeper that scar goes, the stranger what lies beneath it becomes. Here is the part almost no source mentions, and it is the reason the number quoted in nearly every article about this lake understates what is actually there. The 1,642-meter figure everyone cites is where the water column ends. What the water is sitting inside of goes considerably further. Below the waterline, roughly 7 kilometers of accumulated sediment sits on top of the actual rift floor, layers upon layers, built up over tens of millions of years of erosion, runoff, and geological deposit, slowly filling in the crack in the Earth's crust that the water itself occupies. Somewhere inside that sediment, close to where the MIR submersibles found their gas seeps, the methane hydrate deposits sit frozen in place, held stable by the immense pressure of everything above them. Add the sediment layer to the water depth, and the true floor of the Baikal Rift sits somewhere between 8 and 11 kilometers beneath the surface. For comparison, the Mariana Trench, the single deepest point in any ocean on the planet, reaches a maximum depth of around 11 kilometers. That comparison matters more than it might first appear. Once you account for what sits beneath the water, the total scar occupied by this lake rivals the deepest point in any ocean on the entire planet. Nearly every figure quoted about Baikal describes only the water resting on top of something far larger. In the 1990s, an international research effort called the Baikal Drilling Project set out to extract sediment cores directly from that hidden layer. What they pulled up was not just mud. Layer after layer of sediment turned out to hold a continuous climate record, stretching back several million years, one of the longest unbroken continental climate records ever recovered anywhere on Earth. Buried inside a lake, most people assume is just a very deep body of water, sits one of the most valuable climate archives scientists have ever found. And that project only reached a fraction of the total sediment layer. If a few meters of core samples produced a multi-million-year climate record, the 7 kilometers still sitting undisturbed beneath the lake floor, gas hydrates and all, represent a length of buried history nobody has come close to fully reading yet. Given how little is actually known about what sits at the bottom of that rift, it is not surprising that Baikal has attracted legends for centuries, long before anyone had submersibles capable of checking. The Buryat people, indigenous to the Baikal region for thousands of years, tell the story of Angara, daughter of the old man Baikal, who fell in love with the river Yenisei and fled her father's home to reach him. In his fury, Baikal tore a boulder from the mountainside and hurled it after her. That boulder, known today as Shaman Rock, still sits at the mouth of the Angara River, near Irkutsk, marking the lake's only outlet, exactly where the legend says it landed. A second piece of local folklore is harder to dismiss as pure story. For generations, people living along the shore have described strange lights hovering above the surface of the lake at night, sometimes called ghost lights, believed by some to be the spirits of ancestors watching over the water. Researchers studying the phenomenon have proposed a more grounded explanation: methane gas escaping from the lakebed, igniting on contact with the air above the surface. Given what the MIR dives later confirmed about active gas seeps on the lake floor, that explanation lines up with something real happening beneath the water, not just above it. Much of that spiritual tradition centers on Olkhon, the largest island in the lake, roughly 700 square kilometers of forest and grassland rising out of Baikal's western shore. For Buryat shamans, Olkhon has long been regarded as one of the most sacred sites in Asian shamanic tradition, a place where the boundary between the physical world and the spirit world is said to be especially thin. Whatever explanation a person favors for that reputation, the island sits directly above some of the most tectonically active ground in the entire rift. Most lake legends stay exactly that, legend with nothing behind them. Baikal keeps producing exceptions because of specific documented events that predate the MIR dives by decades. In the late 1980s, Soviet scientists conducted an echolocation survey of the lake floor. Sonar equipment of that era was a standard tool used for legitimate scientific mapping, the same kind of technology used to chart ocean floors and locate shipwrecks. During that survey, the equipment recorded a moving object over 30 meters in length. No follow-up expedition in the decades since, including the crude dives that later confirmed the vents and hydrates, has produced a confirmed explanation for what that object was. It remains a real, logged sonar anomaly, recorded by standard scientific equipment, never definitively identified. What a logged anomaly like this actually establishes is simpler, and in its own way, more unsettling. A body of water, this poorly mapped, sitting on top of a rift, this deep, is capable of concealing something large enough to register on formal scientific equipment and still go unexplained decades later. The sonar anomaly is not the only unresolved question hanging over this lake. Every winter, Baikal freezes over almost entirely, its surface turning into ice so clear that in places you can see straight down through it into the water below. From above, satellite imagery has repeatedly captured something stranger sitting on top of that ice. Large, near-perfect circular patterns, some stretching several kilometers across. where the ice thins dramatically compared to everything surrounding it. These circles were first noticed decades ago by people living near the lake, long before satellites existed to photograph them from orbit. Once satellite imaging became widely available, the pattern was confirmed from space repeatedly, appearing in different locations from year to year, always roughly circular, always concentrated in specific regions of the lake, sometimes stretching several kilometers across, from edge to edge. Researchers studying them have proposed that warm water rising from below, potentially connected to the same deep currents and vent activity the MIR dives revealed at the bottom of the rift, may be melting the ice from underneath in a slow, rotating pattern. That explanation remains the leading theory, not a settled conclusion. No research team has yet fully confirmed why the circles form exactly where they do, why they shift position from one year to the next, or why some winters produce far more of them than others. A geologically active floor 8 kilometers down, a sonar anomaly 40 years unexplained, and now a pattern visible from space, forming on the ice above all of it, that scientists are still working out how to fully explain. In most lakes, oxygen decreases with depth. The deeper the water, the harder it becomes for anything to survive down there. That is simply how stratified water behaves. Baikal breaks that rule, and researchers who study the lake's hydrology have spent decades working out exactly why. Twice a year, in spring and again in autumn, a phenomenon called a thermal bar forms where the temperature of the water crosses a specific threshold. Along that boundary, surface water sinks in a narrow band that circles the lake, dragging oxygen-rich water down toward the depths and driving a large-scale renewal of the deep water column. It is a slow, seasonal process, one that scientists are still refining computer models to fully describe, but the effect is consistent. Oxygen reaches depths in Baikal that would be nearly barren in almost any other lake on the planet, including the cold, mineral-rich water near the vents the MIR crews photographed. Baikal is home to more than 1,500 known species of animals and roughly 1,000 species of plants. More than 60% of those species exist nowhere else on the planet, found in this single lake and in no other body of water anywhere in the world. Among them is the Baikal seal, or Nerpa, the only seal species on Earth that lives its entire life in fresh water, with no access to any ocean. Every other seal species on the planet is tied to salt water at some point in its life cycle. This one is not, and researchers have never fully settled how a marine mammal came to live, breed, and remain permanently landlocked inside a rift lake in the middle of Siberia, hundreds of kilometers from the nearest sea. The lake also holds around 56 known species of fish, more than 24 of them found nowhere else, including the amal, a whitefish that has supported local fishing communities for generations and exists in this exact form only within Baikal's water. An ancient rift, poorly mapped at its true depth, geologically active on its floor, sustaining an ecosystem and a species found nowhere else on Earth, sitting on top of a structure that extends nearly as deep as the ocean's deepest trench. The deeper this lake gets studied, the less it resembles anything else classified as a lake at all. Satellite images have captured the bottom of Baikal from hundreds of meters up. The water is so clear, and still, after more than a century of study, and after the first crude dives, finally confirmed what the deepest point actually looks like. The true floor of this rift, the 8 to 11 kilometers beneath the surface, remains almost entirely unexplored. Every few decades, new sediment surveys and submersible expeditions reveal another sliver of what the last 30 million years have buried down there. Ancient climate data, traces of species that vanished long before recorded history. Gas hydrate formations scientists are still working to fully map. Layers that have not been disturbed since long before humans existed to disturb them. The Baikal drilling project reached only the uppermost portion of that record. and even the MIR dives, for all the attention they drew when they finally touched down at 1,642 meters, only photographed the surface of the lake floor. Most of the 7 kilometers beneath it has never been sampled, drilled, or seen by anyone at all. Every figure this video opened with, the depth, the volume, the age, describes only what has been measured so far. The rift itself has never stopped moving, never stopped widening, never stopped burying more of itself under fresh sediment, even as scientists work to read what is already down there. What is still sitting in the kilometers of sediment nobody has fully looked at yet. 2 centimeters closer to the surface every single year, as the rift keeps quietly pulling itself apart. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more ancient mysteries and impossible discoveries.